Fantastic. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Kris Lloyd here from Australia. So it's night time here and it's your morning there. I'm rugged up and you've got no sleep. So yeah, right across the other side of the world. It's great to see you, Patrick, and just sort of be amazing to just have a chat with you. So I'm Kris Lloyd. I'm a cheesemaker, an artisan cheesemaker here in Australia. We produce cow, goat and buffalo milk cheeses. I follow Patrick on Twitter and I've been very interested to hear and see what is going on with the artisan cheese making industry in the UK, and I could draw some parallels, Patrick, and I guess I just thought it'd be fantastic to chat with you and just get a little bit of insight of what's going on over there, and obviously let you know what's going on over here. So if you would like to just introduce yourself now too.
Thank you. I'm Patrick McGuigan. I'm a cheese writer based in the UK. I write for newspapers and magazines like The Telegraph and Delicious and the Financial Times, and I've been writing and interviewing cheesemakers and cheesemongers a lot over this period. I have been doing it for sort of 10, 15 years, but when the coronavirus struck, there's some very amazing stories going on out there. Crisis, but also quite a lot of positive stories as well, which we can maybe come on to. But it sounds like, I think there's probably quite a lot of similarities between what's happening in Australia and the UK, but well, we can find out, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. And maybe just to mention as well that Patrick and I actually met through judging, international cheese judging, where we've both been judging at the World Cheese Awards. So that's how we sort of got to know each other. Yeah. But anyway, interesting, I guess, to understand what is going on with the artisan cheese making industry in the UK. Can you just give us a bit of an idea, maybe take it back to like the beginning, because I guess that to me is really quite interesting, because I feel like maybe things have changed as we've moved through.
Yeah, the UK went into lockdown, full lockdown at the end of March. I think it was sort of the last week of March, and that was when restaurants and pubs and cafes were closed, and people had to stay in their houses really, and weren't allowed out beyond sort of doing an hour's exercise each day. So that was at the, God, it's only a few months really, but it feels like years ago that happened. It's been so much has changed just in these few months, even from so the impact on so that initial phase, I can almost sort of see we're almost like in the third phase now of what's happening with
I
Corona.
agree.
So that initial first phase, which I would say the first sort of month, 3 weeks, first month after lockdown, was completely sort of pulled the rug from underneath a lot of artisan cheesemakers. So there needs to be a distinction. The big guys, the big industrial cheddar makers in the UK who make block cheddar have been doing great. Their sales are up, they've been doing really well. And that's because they supply the supermarkets. And when coronavirus hit, there was a lot of people were scared and didn't know if food supplies would continue. And so people basically stocked up on industrial block cheddar, and we're putting it in their freezer, and they were stockpiling these sort of basic commodity cheeses. But what that meant for the artisan cheesemakers who don't typically supply supermarkets, and if they do, it tends to be on the deli counter. A lot of the deli counters in supermarkets were shut. Shelves were cleared to make space for more block cheddar. So if you did have a listing, perhaps as one of their premium ranges, often the supermarkets delisted artisan cheesemakers to make room for sort of cheap commodity cheese. But the key thing was when the restaurants and hotels closed, that really, really hurt small cheesemakers. So I'm speaking to cheesemakers who literally overnight, when the rules came in, lost 85% of their sales overnight. And the timing of it couldn't have been worse, because Easter was coming, and Mother's Day, sorry. And so cheesemakers had, it's a bit quiet after Christmas, so you start building up your cheese reserves, and you get ready for Easter, when sales sort of take off again after Christmas.
Yep.
So I spoke to cheesemakers who had tons and tons of cheese in their stores, and literally, had lost 85-90% of their sales overnight. So it had nowhere to go. And if you were making soft or blue cheese, which has a much shorter shelf life, the clock was ticking. I spoke to one cheesemaker in Wales who had 40 tons of soft cheese in his stores. He couldn't actually get any more cheese in his stores because he filled them up ready for Easter and Mother's Day, and then and he had nowhere to sell it. So
it's unfathomable, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like, Kris, something similar happened with you, and was that a similar kind of experience for small cheesemakers in Australia?
Yeah, maybe less of the block cheddar thing, but there was still a bit of the block cheddar, big buying up of that commodity going on, but it sounds like it was quite intense over with you, but I mean, obviously those cheeses mature, so that they've got a shelf life that's completely different to all the obviously the soft cheeses. But yeah, I mean, just speaking from my own experience, it was like you say, the tap was just turned off, and we'd just come out of the bushfires. That was the other thing. So we came out of the bushfires where, the fires came literally to our back door, burnt all of our electrical wiring, and so all of our cool rooms completely shut down. So straight after Christmas, we had to basically throw away over 60% of what we had in stock, because we weren't allowed to access the building, and so it had 4 days, sitting without any electricity. A couple of the cool rooms, were fine because the compressor did kick in. So there we were, we'd thrown away all this cheese, only to sort of come back and go, okay, let's stay strong. We've still got the factory, we're going to soldier on and get through this, and we'll start making, filling up our cool rooms, and there we were with all these cool rooms that were just now chock-a-block. We're ready to go, and then COVID hit. And so, and that's where I think, I just panicked. I absolutely panicked. When we were told that cafes and restaurants were going to be closed. And then what would happen, our distributors were sending through, please disregard last order, cancel order. This order is now cancelled. And so you're just there and you're thinking, okay, how am I going to run my business? I've got all these staff. And so it was just, I was really sad. It takes a lot to get me to panic, but I absolutely did.
Kris, I can't imagine you panicking. I've known you for several years now, and the thought of you panicking is a strange thought, because you're so on it, and so you're such a force of nature.
Totally.
That it really floored you, did it?
Oh, absolutely. And, in my wildest dreams, I would never have thought right across the world, like it wasn't just here, but right across the world, that, cafes and restaurants would be ordered to be closed.
Kris, that's interesting, that international perspective, because I've spoken to cheesemakers in France and Italy and the US, exactly the same experience, where particularly these small artisan guys who sort of rely on restaurants and specialist shops, that kind of thing, it's affected everyone. I know in France there's a big campaign at the moment encouraging people to eat appellation cheeses, the protected designation of origin cheeses, because they've there's several thousand tons of cheese that still needs to be eaten. The other thing that I forgot to mention about this time, obviously the spring is when the animals, the cows, sheep, goats are all coming into milk in a big way. You know, the cows are suddenly out of pasture, the milk is flowing, and you can't turn an animal off. So, you know, the milk just keeps coming. And if you're a cheesemaker, particularly cheesemakers who have their own animals, that cost, you know, they can't just say, okay, we're not going to take milk for a while. The sheep or the cows keep giving milk. You have to keep feeding them, which costs quite a lot. You know, you supplement their diet. You know, if they're out of pasture, you might supplement them. So that was, you know, what do you do with the milk? That was a lot of cheesemakers I was speaking to were saying, where do I put it? What, you know, if I make cheese with it, there's no one to buy the cheese. Some cheesemakers are lucky and they would have a contract with a kind of wholesaler who would take milk for liquid milk, you know, to go into
for drinking
for coffee
milk,
or for go to one of the big cheddar processors or something like that. But quite a lot of the small cheesemakers in Britain use all their milk for cheese. And so actually they couldn't sell it as liquid milk because there was a big fall in demand for liquid milk as well. Because if you think of all the coffee shops that shut, all the hotels, schools, schools are a big market for milk, they all closed. So actually demand for liquid milk dropped. So it wasn't like there was a big, you could sort of divert the milk elsewhere. So we saw cheesemaker, you know, interesting. And I suppose this is sort of the second phase where cheesemakers, I think a bit like you, were just a bit rabbit in the headlights to begin with. And then started to move and do stuff and really try to save their businesses. So one of the things they did is start to make a lot more hard cheese. So you could store the milk, you know, so if you've got a brie style cheese, you might get a few, you know, you're lucky if you can get a couple of months shelf life on that. But with a cheddar, you could keep that for 18 months. And I know one cheesemaker who's trying to make a kind of Parmesan style cheese that he can keep for 3 years, which I think is really innovative, you know. So that's just some way of parking the milk for a bit until this is all over. And at the end of it, we'll have some delicious hard cheeses.
Yes, well, this is the thing. I mean, it will be really, really interesting to see because, you know, as you say, I mean, there was the liquid milk side of things, and you know, I work very closely with my milk suppliers. I don't grow my own milk. I have milk suppliers. And, you know, for me to turn around and say, okay, I'm going to close down production for X amount of months, you know, I couldn't see an end to this. There was no kind of end game. That would have just been totally devastating for our milk suppliers. Leave alone that, obviously, I employ people and what was going to happen to my staff. So, you know, I guess after I'd slept on it, I thought, well, yeah, I've just got to keep going and I've just got to be clever. And so eventually what we ended up doing was selling well, as I mentioned, we had stocked up our cool rooms to the brim. And so we ended up ramping up our online and doing bulk buys online, basically cutting our margin and just selling to the broader community. And, you know, I just thought, look, I would just rather do that than toss the stuff, you know, put it to wastage. So, you know, that was one way that we managed to get rid of all of our stocks through this means. Obviously, as I said, we cut our margins, and then we also produced a hard cheese. We ended up calling it spilt milk because it just seemed totally appropriate.
Great name.
And, you know, a hard cheese that we know that we can mature out to, you know, maybe even 18 months, 2 years. So, yes, I mean, I really look forward to judging with you in 2 years' time.
It would be great, wouldn't it? All these amazing new cheeses to try.
I hope I get the hard cheese category. So, you know, we have had to be really quite, you know, nimble and pivot and turn and twist and just try and make the most of a situation that actually, I mean, I would have just never ever dreamed would have occurred, Patrick.
Yeah, that pivot word that you use, Kris, is one that has been used loads. Everybody's been pivoting in the UK. All the cheesemakers, that's the word. When I interview people, they're all talking about pivoting. And so we saw a lot of that online stuff, where
Yes.
remarkable stuff where, you know, cheesemakers who, honestly, their websites were shocking, terrible websites. Within 2 days, they had brand new websites with online selling capability.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time they'd built them themselves. You know, it was necessity is the
Yes.
mother of invention. Suddenly cheesemakers
Indeed.
overnight became IT and website building experts, you know.
Yes. That's sad.
Yeah, well, but it worked. And so
You're right.
so that was interesting. People making hard cheese, people
Yeah.
saying, right, we're going to sell online. Cheesemongers, the sort of the independent retailers, so cheesemongers, farm shops, delis, who were obviously allowed to stay open, they've really come to the fore and really helped the artisan industry with amazing online, you know, you can get boxes with 5-6 different cheeses in. And then one of the things that I did, so I was in the middle of finishing a book, actually. I've got a book coming out hopefully later this year, although it might be put back, called The Philosophy of Cheese, which is it's a kind of a short history of cheese in Europe and the US. Anyway, I'd been in the final week of getting this proof finished, and I'd been in a complete book tunnel and hadn't really, I knew coronavirus was going on. I was trying to finish this book. The kids were off school. I was up to my eyes and stuff. And I came out, I sent off the manuscript, and then and first thing I did was phone up and speak to a few of my mates who were cheesemakers. And it was at that point I realized just how serious it was. This was a couple of weeks into the pandemic. And they were saying we're having to throw away milk. They were literally pouring milk down the drain. People were throwing away cheese. And I thought this is a proper. We could lose some of our best cheesemakers in this period. So I thought, what can I do? I mean, my work's dropped off a cliff as well, and I had some time, and I thought I could sort of, what can I do to help? So we set up. I got on the phone to a friend of mine called Tracy Colley, who runs the Academy of Cheese, and together, the Academy of Cheese is like a qualification system that's been set up in the UK for cheese. A bit like the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, but all around it. But so together we put on a kind of online cheese festival. Within the space of about 3 weeks, we went from me having an idea to doing, it was called the British Cheese Weekender. And because everyone was in lockdown, you know, you can't go to a tasting, you couldn't go to a live one. So we did, I think in the end we had nearly 40 talks online, streamed live or videos from Britain's best cheesemakers, cheesemongers, cheese writers like me. And we had a whole weekend. It was a bank holiday weekend. We had people doing whiskey and cheese tastings. We had the history of cheese. We had a farm tour where, you know, cheesemakers were taking the public round their farm and showing how they make cheese.
Surely Charlie Turnbull was involved.
We got him on. He did a kind of question time event in the evening where with Jamie Montgomery, a fantastic cheddar maker, and then Ruth Raskin, who's from the Fine Cheese Company, who's a brilliant retailer. But basically what was really interesting is how the industry, in this is like the second phase, how the industry reacted and pulled together. You know, I'm sure it's the same in Australia, but even the global cheese community is a very close knit, helpful. There's a real community amongst people in the industry. And in the UK, everyone came together. This cheese weekend, in the end, Prince Charles backed the campaign. So we had His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, backing the British Cheese Weekender, and he donated or put up one of his favorite cheese recipes. So that really, you know, and the message was, you know, tune in buy some great cheese, tune in for it. And the message the whole time was, cheesemakers are in trouble. Please buy their cheese direct from them or direct from a cheesemonger. And it worked, actually. Sales have really picked up. And the general public, and it sounds like you've had this experience in Adelaide, the general public have been keen to back their small producers. They just needed to know what the problem was. And then they're buying, you know, and discovering all this amazing cheese.
Yeah. So your cheese weekender, I guess, was the catalyst for a bit more awareness of what was going on, and it's really quite interesting, Patrick, because I feel like maybe people don't realise just even that one purchase that they make, if that you multiply that. And it can make such a huge difference. And, I think it's really important, no matter where you are, particularly at the moment, because we haven't got transport and whatever else. And so many businesses are in such dire trouble, that people do support their local producers, even more broadly than cheese, right?
Oh yeah.
If we take it out, to food. So in your opinion, or do you know, because I guess the thing that concerns me about this is businesses just completely falling off the radar, never coming back. Fantastic cheesemakers that just kind of go, wow, this is just too hard, or even just fantastic farms, where the quality of the milk is just superb, that just go, well, look, it's just too hard. Is that something that has occurred at all?
Not massively. That it's certainly those first few weeks. It was, we were looking at losing cheesemakers, and then there's been this kind of surge of support. I've written articles. Right. Jamie Oliver, the celebrity chef, he's done a lot with Neal's Yard Dairy on his Instagram channel, sort of promoting British cheese. And so Neal's Yard Dairy did a Save British Cheese box that you could buy, where in that box they put cheeses from producers that were really suffering, that had a lot of stock, which is very clever. Really quickly they could shift. When Jamie Oliver says, please buy this box and save British cheese, it's remarkable how the public respond. So for some of our best cheesemakers, such as Westcombe Cheddar, Jamie Montgomery's Ogle Shield, which is a soft washed rind cheese, we had Stitchelton, which is a raw milk Stilton style cheese. They were all looking in big trouble, really, but they managed with Jamie Oliver, with the British Cheese Weekender, with lots of articles. They've managed to shift it, and are now in a position where they're making again. So they've shifted all the backlog and are starting to make again, and they're selling through independent retailers and directly themselves. Interestingly, the supermarkets have sort of come back now, I think, because there was such a noise around saving British cheese. I think the supermarkets, their customers were asking them, where's Kirkham's Lancashire? You used to sell it and you're not selling it now. And so they thought, well, we better get this back in, because people want to buy this specialist cheese. So Waitrose have started listing, they're doing a kind of artisan cheese box that you can buy from Waitrose, which is one of the sort of top end retailer supermarket chains in the UK. And then Tesco's, which is another the biggest supermarket chain here, has started stocking more specialist cheeses. So I think that the complete crisis has passed. Sales for these small cheesemakers are nowhere near where they were pre-COVID, because the restaurants are still not open. But it looks like restaurants will open next month in July in some form in the UK. So that will provide a bit of market, So I think there's not been there's one cheesemaker I know who's decided to stop making. And that's Innis, who make a lovely raw milk goat's cheese. And they've decided to sell their goats and to get out of the industry. But there were other factors with that. I think there was a sort of a family decision that needed to be made, and COVID kind of pushed them in a certain direction.
Pushed them along a bit.
But we haven't seen anyone go bust yet. I still think we're quite early on in it all, though, in some ways.
Yes.
Because I don't know, in Australia, has the government been supporting? Have you got a furlough scheme in Australia?
Yeah, look, the government has been very supportive. I mean, the issue though was, obviously around restaurants and cafes being closed. So we since have had a relaxing of those rules. probably for the past month. It started off very, very, you know, conservatively, 10 people allowed in a cafe. But, you know, again, you do the multiply factor and, you know, you've got 150 restaurants open, and all of a sudden there's a bit more, you know, stock that starts to flow through. So, yeah, we're sort of now... you know, there's another thing though that is going on now, which is again very, very interesting, and that is that obviously we're not having aircraft coming in. So what that means is we're not getting the imported cheeses coming through. So soft cheeses in particular. So your Bries and your Camemberts and whatever from France and well, right across to Europe. The harder cheeses perhaps are okay on sea freight, but as I said, the softer cheeses that come by air, well, they're just not coming in. And so what that's done is that now, you know, we've just got everybody asking us to make a gazillion tons of soft cheese because there isn't, you know, there's a gap. There's a real gap. Now that's an interesting conundrum, isn't it?
That's quite exciting, really, for you, isn't it? I mean, there's an opportunity there.
Well, it is an opportunity, yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, you know, it gives you a chance to get your cheese into someone's mouth that may never have tried it before, because absolutely that's the only cheese, you know, that, you know, how it is. There's some cheeses that you just think, oh no, that's absolutely the only one that I will buy. You can't find it, and you look for an alternative, because that's obviously what you know, Australian distributors are doing now, is they're looking for alternatives to put on the shelves. And yeah, who knows where that will, you know, end up. I think it's interesting.
Is in terms of the social distancing in Australia and how it works with restaurants and cafes, do you still have social distancing? Is it what is it, 1 meter, 2 meters? Because it's a debate that we're having in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's 1.5.
Okay.
1.5. We still have the 1.5, but I think we're up to now 75 people allowed in a restaurant. But we have no active cases here in where I live in South Australia. There are 0 active cases, so it just seems, you know, pretty obvious. I mean, obviously, if we continue with the social distancing, I think that's really what the you know, the health department is saying. We'll keep it in check. We expect that we'll have some cases, but you know, if we continue with the social distancing, that it should relax. And of course, you know, I have my Cheese Fest in October, where, you know, I might have perhaps 20,000 people coming, all gathering just to see, smell, prod, taste cheese. So I don't know what that's going to look like just yet. I mean, we're definitely going ahead, but it might be a different iteration.
Yeah. I mean, what's clear, I mean, I don't want to get too political, but in the UK, in my opinion, the government have not really handled the outbreak very well. So, you know, we've had this really long period. It's still looking very difficult for restaurants to reopen. We have a 2 meter rule in the UK.
Do you?
Yeah, and actually we're having this debate at the moment about there's a lot of pressure from the food service sector to say, can that be reduced to 1 meter? The World Health Organization recommends 1 meter. So you know, in some ways we're going above and beyond in the UK, because 2 meters it's really difficult to open a restaurant with 2 meters. I mean,
no,
I think the difference is at 2 meters, you can get about 30%, on average, you can get about 30% of your customers into a restaurant. At 1 meter, you can get 70%, which is the
Big
difference for restaurants in terms of survival and not, basically.
Absolutely.
The problem is that we still have quite high levels of infection in the UK.
Sure.
You know, so it's the government are having to go much slower and be much more cautious, quite rightly so. It's because we kind of lost control of it in the middle of the pandemic. So for the cheese industry, you know, there are signs that it's starting to kind of open up a little bit, but I think in the UK it's going to be very slow. And when I was asking about government support, the issue in the UK is the government stepped in and said, we will pay workers wages. You can furlough them.
Yes.
So you basically, they don't work and the government will pay up to 80% of their wages. Now that scheme has kind of meant that a lot of cheesemakers could have sort of furloughed half their staff and then just worked with a really small team to keep the business going. The furlough scheme is starting to kind of come to an end now.
Right.
And that will be in September. Really, it finishes completely. So at that point, I think, you know, I think this cheese industry's done well to survive. At that point, if the restaurants aren't open and doing quite good business, there's either going to be lots of redundancies, or there's going to be people having to just close up their businesses. So I think, you know, we're sort of in a third stage now, I would say, of sort of waiting and seeing. But I think there's other stages coming in the UK. It's quite sort of specific.
Well, we've had a similar scheme, you know, with government support for wages, and but you know, we're probably just in a different sort of situation. But clearly, you need the restaurants and the cafes to open. You know, it's just I guess you just don't realise how much cheese actually goes through cafes and restaurants. I mean, it is huge. People do obviously do their shopping and they buy cheese for cheese platters at home. And you're in your summer, so I imagine that this is you know, when you in your spring rather, but you're still doing outdoor entertaining and so on. So now is really the time, isn't it, that you know, you want people to be buying cheese. So I hope that your, you know, fingers crossed, I do hope that your restaurants and your cafes you know, can open soon, and if not that, you know, the 1 metre rule I think is sounding to me like it, you know, a lot more viable, because by the time you pay rent and you only have 30% of your custom allowed in, it doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it just doesn't work. I mean, a lot of restaurants, certainly in the cities in the UK, the model is, because rent and rates are so high, the model is small venues and as many seats as you can in there. You know, it's about definitely cramming in as many covers as you can into quite small spaces, and that's, you know, central London rent and rates are huge, so that has been the model, and that doesn't really work very well with social distancing, you know, because if you can only fit 30 people in normally, with social distancing you can maybe get 10 in. It just doesn't stack, the numbers don't stack up. But
no, so it still remains, you know, that the cheesemakers need to be pivoting and clever and nimble, and you know, they need to find tenacity and you know, a persistence to keep going. And look, you know, I think, you know, I speak for you know, I speak for myself, but I think that I probably speak for most cheesemakers. You know, we're pretty passionate about what we do. We do love what we do, and that is, you know, what kind of keeps you going. You don't want to just throw it all away. So maybe, Patrick, we need to touch base again once all of this is over, and just see, you know, I don't know, maybe we can have a little bit of hard cheese on our desks and do a little tasting.
We should be eating cheese right now, shouldn't we? I mean, it's just gone 9 o'clock in the morning here on a Monday morning. I'm ready for cheese right now. You know, I normally have a cheese platter around this time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, but yeah, perhaps we should touch base. I'm just going to check my little questions here that I have. I think we've really covered everything that I wanted to.
What I think is really interesting about all of this is that it's completely changed our lives, this virus, in so many different ways. You know, we're having a Zoom conversation now. Nobody heard of Zoom 3 or 4 months ago. I mean, but I think there's some positives that have come out of this in terms of how people buy food, certainly in the UK, is that because it's been quite hard to get food from supermarkets at times, you know, you couldn't get delivery slots, there were long queues to get in, is people started to to find alternatives. So they started going to their local butcher or their local cheese shop or the veg shop, or getting veg boxes or cheese boxes delivered to them. And so I think there's a whole raft of people who have discovered artisan food production during this period. Possibly, I think quite a lot of them for the first time, and have found that actually it's not that much more expensive, but tastes so much better. The shopping experience is so much nicer. You can get it delivered to your door. You can, buy the person who's made it often. So I'm hoping that actually, as things go back to normal, whatever that looks like, that I don't think everyone's just going to go rushing back to the supermarkets to buy block cheddar.
No.
I think this might have changed shopping habits, and people stick by smaller artisan family businesses because they've had a good experience during lockdown with them. So I hope they do, because I think we all need, cheesemakers need that support going forward, don't they? I mean, it's not just something you do during lockdown and then go back to, cheesemakers are going to need long-term support. Yeah.
Oh no, they definitely will, and I do agree with you. I think that that's probably going to be the silver lining. We've had to do things differently, and in doing that, we've been forced to do things differently. We've discovered things that we quite enjoy. I mean, I now get my vegetables delivered from a fantastic little grower just up in the Adelaide Hills, where my factory is, and that just came about because I couldn't, I didn't have the time to be lining up in queues waiting to get into stores. Can I just ask you one other thing though, before perhaps we go? What has happened to your farmers markets? Have they been able to continue operating?
I think it's about half of them continued because it all depended on where they were and whether they could do social distancing, so a lot of it was sort of practical. So speaking, because a lot of cheesemakers either have stalls at farmers markets or supply people have stalls there, and I think it's around half have managed to keep trading, and so that's been, a lot of people have discovered really good food. Perhaps they wouldn't have gone to farmers markets previously, but it was hard to get food from anywhere else, so they would go there. And they're allowed to reopen now. All farmers markets can now reopen, so they're back up and running. So I mean, it's so clear when you buy good cheese from a small cheesemaker just how it's so much better. Just in terms of just being a selfish consumer, like the cheese you buy from a small artisan cheesemaker is so much better than most of the stuff sold in supermarkets, that I think once you experience it, it's quite hard to go back. So I'm hoping that quite a lot of people will stick with it, I think,
and maybe just to quickly just cover off some of the reasons why it's different and why it's so good is, usually because you're buying directly from the producer, you haven't had to have gone through the supply chain, and it's gone into some sort of cool room. Has it gone into gas? They put different gases in some of the cool rooms as well. So just that whole logistics and the transport is really, that equation's taken out. And cheese, especially soft cheeses, they don't travel that well. They're not designed for big long hauls. I mean, obviously the harder cheeses are. So I think that would probably be one of the key reasons why buying from a farmer's market or from your local producer is, I mean, that to me is a good enough reason, if nothing else. And, you're also saving on food miles and, all of that sort of stuff that I know that, we all talk about and think about, but the reality of it sometimes just doesn't come to mind.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is these sort of smaller local food networks that have really come to the fore during coronavirus. It means the money's kept within your local community.
Yeah.
Which is really important, I think. So your cheesemaker that you buy your cheese from at the farmers market, they buy their wine from the local vineyard,
Yeah.
and the vineyard spends their money at the local bookshop. You know, it just makes your own particular area a richer area, you know, financially, but also just in terms of the diversity of places you can buy food and drink from. So
yeah, so yeah, it's probably, hopefully it's made us a little bit more conscious about, supporting our local and our, just the sustainability of our whole region, you know, where it is that you actually reside, and the different areas that you're in. So it is, yes, perhaps a lot has been learnt.
yeah, I hope so. I really do. I think, you know, that would be a real positive coming out of this.
Yeah. All right, Patrick. Well, I'll thank you so
Pleasure.
much for chatting. It's been a really great insight, getting your views and just to understand what is going on with the cheese making industry in the UK. Let's touch base again.
Next time, yes.
Maybe
Let's speak in a few months when, and we must have some cheese with us next time.
Yes.
Was
Next time we will. I'll have my spilt milk here. By then
okay.
it's going to probably be about 6 months old, and yeah, I'll talk you through it, and I'm sure that you'll have another lovely hard cheese as well.
Yeah, you do that, and I'll find. I'll get one of the new cheeses that are being made in lockdown, and we can compare notes. We can do a bit of judging live on camera.
Fantastic. And and we'll get you to Cheese Fest. Maybe not this year, Patrick, but hopefully next year.
Virtually, we can always do virtual, you know.
No, I'm thinking about that now. I'm going to take a leaf out of your book.
Yeah,
don't you worry.
Anything to push good cheese. Let's do it. Yeah, I'm happy to share my insights.
Good on you, Patrick. You're such a great ambassador for the artisan cheese industry. And when you're out and about, wish them all the best from Australia, from us too.
Lovely to talk to you, Kris. Take care.
Yeah, lovely to chat. Bye.
Bye.